Imagine sipping tea in your sunlit conservatory, only to spot a lifeless body slumped among the ferns. It's a chilling discovery that shatters the peace of a quaint English village. Chapter 1. The Tranquil Morning Shattered. Okay.
Hi, folks.
Let's dive right into our story. We're in the sleepy village of St. Mary Mead, where nothing much ever happens, or so everyone thinks. It's a crisp autumn morning, and our heroine, Miss Jane Marple, is up early as usual, tending to her garden. She's an elderly spinster with a sharp mind hidden behind her knitting needles and a gentle smile. Miss Marple lives in a cozy cottage with blooming roses climbing the walls, and she knows everyone in the village, their habits, their secrets, and sometimes even what they're thinking before they do. She's not your typical detective. She's more like that wise aunt who notices everything without seeming to try. On this particular day, Miss Marple decides to visit her old friend, Colonel Arthur Bantry, and his wife Dolly, at their grand home, called Gossington Hall. The Bantrys are well-respected folks. The colonel is retired from the army, always puffing on his pipe and reminiscing about his days in India, while Dolly is bubbly and loves hosting garden parties. Gossington Hall is a sprawling estate with manicured lawns, a library full of leather-bound books, and a beautiful conservatory filled with exotic plants like orchids and palms. It's the kind of place where you'd expect afternoon teas and polite chatter, not drama. Miss Marple arrives around 10 o'clock, carrying a basket of fresh scones she baked that morning. Dolly greets her at the door with a warm hug. "Jane, darling, come in." Arthur's in the study, grumbling about the newspaper again. "Let's have tea in the conservatory. The light is just perfect today." They chat about the village gossip as they walk through the house. Mrs. Price-Ridley's latest complaint about the postman, and how young Raymond West, Miss Marple's nephew, is off writing another book in London, as they step into the conservatory. The air is warm and humid, scented with earth and flowers. Sunlight streams through the glass panels, casting patterns. On the tiled floor, Dolly sets down the tea tray on a wicker table, but then she freezes. "Jane, look over there. Is that ... a shoe?" Miss Marple follows her gaze to the far corner, behind a cluster of ferns. They're half hidden by the foliage. Lies a body, a young woman in a glittering evening dress, her blonde hair splayed out like a halo, but her face pale and still. No breathing, no movement. It's clear she's dead. Dolly lets out a small scream and clutches Miss Marple's arm. "Jane, what on earth? Who is she? How did she get here?" Miss Marple, ever calm, kneels down carefully, her knitting bag still slung over her shoulder. She checks for a pulse. Nothing. The woman's neck shows faint bruises, like fingerprints, and there's a faint smell of bitter almonds in the air. "Poison, perhaps," Miss Marple murmurs to herself, her mind already racing. She straightens up and says gently, "Dolly, we must call the police at once. And Arthur, fetch him quickly." Colonel Bantry bursts in moments later, his face turning red with shock. "Good God, in my conservatory. This is outrageous." He's a man of action, so he immediately phones Inspector Slack from the local constabulary. Slack arrives within the hour, a gruff man with a mustache who doesn't think much of amateurs like Miss Marple. "All right, let's secure the scene," he barks, ordering his constables to cordon off the area. The body is identified tentatively as Ruby Keene, a dancer from the nearby Majestic Hotel in Dannemouth. She was reported missing last night after a performance. As the police start their investigation, Miss Marple observes quietly from the sidelines. She notices details that others miss, a smudged footprint on the floor that doesn't match the Bantry's. Shoes, a torn piece of fabric caught on a thorny plant, and how the conservatory door to the garden shows no signs of forced entry. It seems she knew her way in, Miss Marple thinks. Dolly is distraught, pacing and wondering aloud, "But why here? We don't even know her." The colonel mutters about scandals ruining their reputation. Inspector Slack questions the Bantrys first. "When did you last check the conservatory?" he asks. Dolly recalls locking it up around 8 last evening after watering the plants. No one heard anything unusual during the night. Slack then turns to Miss Marple, eyeing her suspiciously. "And you, ma'am? See anything odd on your way here?" Miss Marple smiles serenely. "Only the usual birds in the trees, Inspector. But do look at that footprint. It might belong to someone who wears expensive leather soles." While the police Photograph the scene and wait for the coroner. Miss Marple slips out to the garden for a better view. She spots a gardener, old Mr. Prescott, trimming hedges nearby. "Morning, Miss Marple," he says, tipping his hat. "It's terrible business, eh?" She engages him in casual talk, learning that he saw a flashy car parked near the estate late last night. "A red convertible, not from around here. Thought it was one of the Colonel's friends," he adds. Miss Marple files this away. It could be crucial. Back inside, the coroner arrives and confirms death by strangulation. With possible cyanide involvement, that almond smell, time of death, sometime between midnight and 2 a.m. Ruby Keene was only 18, full of life. Working as a professional dancer who would want her dead. Suspects start emerging in Miss Marple's mind. Perhaps a jealous lover, someone from the hotel with a grudge. As the chapter wraps up, the police wrap up their initial sweep, and Miss Marple heads home, her mind buzzing. She knows this is just the beginning. Murders like this always tie back to human nature, greed, or passion. Stick around, because in the next chapter, we'll uncover Ruby's tangled web of relationships at the Majestic Hotel, and meet some shady characters who had motives aplenty. Chapter 2. Shadows at the Majestic Hotel. The sun climbs higher over St. Mary Mead. But the air feels heavier now, thick with whispers of murder. Miss Marple, back in her cottage, sips her afternoon tea, her knitting needles clicking softly as she thinks about Ruby Keene. The young dancer's death in the Bantry's Conservatory is the talk of the village. And Miss Marple knows the answers lie beyond the sleepy hedgerows down at the Majestic Hotel in Dannemouth, where Ruby worked. She decides to visit the hotel, slipping on her best hat and a light shawl. The Majestic is a grand seaside establishment. All white columns and chandeliers where the wealthy come to dance and dine. It's a world of glamour. But Miss Marple knows glamour often hides darker truths. She takes the afternoon bus to Dannemouth. A short ride through rolling hills. The hotel looms into view, its terraces overlooking the sparkling sea. Inside, the lobby buzzes with guests, ladies in fur stoles, men in tailored suits, and waiters gliding with trays of champagne. Miss Marple, looking like any harmless old lady, finds a plush armchair near the reception and observes. She's not here to interrogate. She's here to listen, to catch the threads of gossip that always unravel in places like this. At the front desk, a nervous young clerk named Henry fidgets with his tie. Miss Marple overhears him whispering to a porter about Ruby's absence from last night's dance performance. "She was supposed to close the show," Henry says, "but she vanished." After her first number, Mr. Jefferson was furious. Miss Marple's ears perk up. Mr. Jefferson, she learns, is Conway Jefferson, a wealthy widower and regular at the Majestic, known for his generosity and his fondness for Ruby. Interesting. She thinks, tucking her knitting into her bag. She wanders toward the ballroom, where a band is rehearsing for tonight's show. The dance floor gleams under crystal lights, but there's tension in the air. A group of dancers huddles in a corner, their voices low. Miss Marple catches snippets. "Ruby was always hogging the spotlight," says a sharp-faced girl named Josie Turner, tossing her dark curls. "She thought she was better than us." Another dancer, a lanky young man named Raymond Starr, shrugs. "She had talent, Josie, you know that. But she had enemies too." Miss Marple notes the bitterness in Josie's tone and the way Raymond's eyes dart nervously, pretending to admire a potted palm. Miss Marple edges closer to a conversation between two hotel maids polishing a staircase. Ruby was in trouble. One whispers, "I saw her arguing with that man in the red car last week outside, near the service entrance." The other maid nods. "Yeah, and she was crying. Said something about money." Miss Marple's mind flashes to the gardener's mention of a red convertible. A coincidence? She doesn't believe in those. She decides to seek out Conway Jefferson. She finds him in the hotel's lounge, a silver-haired man in a wheelchair, his face lined but kind. He's with his son-in-law, Mark Gaskell, a slick type with a pencil mustache, and his daughter-in-law, Adelaide Addy, a quiet woman with sad eyes. Jefferson had taken Ruby under his wing, treating her almost like a daughter, or so he claims. She was a bright girl, he tells Miss Marple, who introduces herself as a friend of the Bantrys. Full of life. I can't believe anyone would harm her. But Mark interrupts, his voice sharp. She was trouble, Con. Always flirting, always scheming. You were too soft on her. Addie says nothing, but her fingers twist her handkerchief. Tightly, Miss Marple asks gently about Ruby's last night. Jefferson says she danced her first set, a lively jazz number, then told him she felt ill and needed air. That was around 10 p.m. No one saw her after that, until her body turned up. At Gossington Hall. Mark snorts. She probably ran off with some man and got herself into a mess. Addie shoots him a look, but stays silent. Miss Marple senses undercurrents jealousy, perhaps or something deeper next. She chats with the hotel's manager, Mr. Prestwick, a pompous man with a gold watch chain. He's eager to keep the scandal quiet. Ruby was popular with guests, he says, but she could be reckless. Always talking to strangers, accepting gifts. He mentions a mysterious guest, a man named Basil Blake, film director from London who'd been seen with Ruby. Basil's known for his wild parties and flashy red car. Miss Marple makes a mental note to track him down. As evening falls, Miss Marple strolls the hotel gardens where fairy lights twinkle. She overhears a waiter talking about Ruby's last performance. She looks scared, he says, kept glancing at the balcony like someone was watching her. Miss Marple follows. His gaze to the balcony overlooking the ballroom. It's empty now, but she imagines a shadowy figure there, watching Ruby's every move. Was it her killer? Before leaving, she stops by the bar, where Raymond Starr, the dancer, is nursing a drink. She engages him with her usual charm, asking about Ruby's friends. Raymond hesitates, then admits Ruby had been secretive lately. She mentioned a big plan to get out of Tanamouth, he says. Said she'd met someone important. Wouldn't tell me who. His face clouds. Miss Marple wonders if he's hiding something or someone. As she boards the bus back to St. Mary Mead, the sea fades into the dusk. Ruby Keane's life was a tangle of ambition, charm, and danger. The majestic hotel is full of suspects. Josie with her envy, Mark with his resentment, Basil with his mysterious car. And what about that shadowy figure on the balcony? Miss Marple's knitting needles will have to wait. Her mind is already stitching together clues. Stay tuned, because next time, we'll follow her as she digs into Basil Blake's flashy world and uncovers a secret that could crack the case wide open. Chapter 3. The flashy world of Basil Blake, the morning mist, clings to St. Mary Mead as Miss Marple sets out again, her sensible shoes crunching on the gravel path. Her destination today is the home of Basil Blake, the film director whose red convertible keeps cropping up in whispers about Ruby Keane. Basil's cottage, a modern affair with sleek lines and big windows, sits on the edge of the village, a stark contrast to the thatched roofs around it. He is an outsider here, known for throwing loud parties that annoy the neighbors. Miss Marple, however, isn't one to judge by appearances. She's more interested in what lies beneath the surface. She arrives mid-morning, carrying a jar of her homemade gooseberry jam as a pretext for her visit. Basil answers the door himself. A tall man in his 30s, with tousled hair and a silk scarf knotted loosely around his neck. He's all charm, flashing a grin that's probably won over many a starlet. Miss Marple, is it? Come in, come in. Sorry about the mess late night. The living room is cluttered with empty wine glasses, records strewn about, and a faint smell of cigarette smoke. A blonde woman in a satin dressing gown lounges on the sofa. Dinah Lee, Basil's girlfriend. An actress with a reputation for drama, Miss Marple settles into a chair, offering the jam with a smile. I heard you knew Ruby Keane, she says lightly, as if it's just village chatter. Basil's grin falters for a split second. Ruby, sure. Met her at the Majestic. Nice kid. Good dancer. Lighting a cigarette. Nice. She was trouble, always cozying up to Basil at parties. Basil shoots her a look, but Miss Marple catches the tension. She asks about the night Ruby disappeared, keeping her tone curious but gentle. Basil claims he was at the hotel for the dance show but left early, around 9:30, to host a party at his cottage. Dozens of people here, drinking and dancing. Till dawn, he says. Dinah nods a bit too quickly. Yeah, it was a riot. Didn't see Ruby, though. Miss Marple notices a record on the turntable jazz, the same kind Ruby danced to. She also spots a pair of men's shoes by the door, their soles caked with dried mud that looks suspiciously like the soil from the Bantry's garden. Pretending to admire the view, Miss Marple steps onto the terrace. The red convertible is parked. Out front, gleaming in the sunlight, she notes a small scratch on the bumper and a faint stain on the passenger seat lipstick, perhaps. She asks casually if Basil drove to Gossington Hall that night. He laughs, a bit too loudly. Me? No way. I was here all night. Ask anyone. But his fingers tap nervously on his coffee cup, and Miss Marple files that away. Dinah, eager to change the subject, starts ranting about the village's nosy residents. They're always spying on us, thinking we're up to no good. Miss? Marple nods sympathetically, steering the conversation back to Ruby. Dinah, let's slip that Ruby had visited the cottage a few weeks ago for a party. She was all over some rich guy kept whispering to him in the corner, Dinah says, her voice sharp with jealousy. When Miss Marple presses for a name, Dinah clams up. Glancing at Basil, leaving the cottage, Miss Marple takes a detour through the village to chat with Mrs. Price Ridley, the local busybody. Over tea, Mrs. Price Ridley is delighted to share gossip about Basil's party that night. Lights blazing, music blaring until 3 in the morning, she huffs. And I saw that red car of his driving toward Gossington Hall around midnight. Miss Marple raises an eyebrow. It contradicts Basil's story. She thanks Mrs. Price Ridley and heads to the post office, where the postmistress, Miss Weatherby, mentions seeing Basil arguing with a young woman in an evening dress outside his cottage. A few nights before Ruby's death, back at her own cottage, Miss Marple sits by the fire, her knitting untouched. She thinks about Basil's charm, Dinah's jealousy, and that muddy shoe. Could Basil have driven Ruby to Gossington Hall? But why? Was it a lover's quarrel or something more calculated? She recalls Dinah's mention of a rich guy at the party. Could it be Conway Jefferson or someone else entirely? The pieces don't fit yet, but Miss Marple knows human nature, greed, love, or revenge always leaves a trail. She decides to visit the police station to see if Inspector Slack has new leads. He's in a foul mood, swamped with reports. That Blake fellow's alibi checks out, he grumbles. Half a dozen partygoers swear he never left his cottage. But Miss Marple knows alibis can be bought or faked, especially among Basil's flashy crowd. She mentions the muddy shoes and the red car's scratch, and Slack grudgingly agrees to look into it. As she leaves, she overhears a constable mention a missing necklace, ruby-encrusted, a gift to Ruby from an admirer, stolen perhaps, or a clue to her killer. As the sun sets, Miss Marple walks home, her mind weaving connections. Basil's world is one of bright lights and dark secrets, and Ruby got caught in its orbit. Was she a victim of passion, or did she know something dangerous? The trail is getting warmer, and Miss Marple's instincts tell her the next clue lies closer to home back at Gossington Hall, where the Bantrys might know more than they realize. Stick around, because next time we'll unravel hidden tensions in the Bantry household in a surprising discovery that changes everything. Chapter 4. Tensions at Gossington Hall. The late afternoon sun bathes St. Mary Mead in a golden glow as Miss Marple makes her way back to Gossington Hall. The grand estate feels different now, its elegance overshadowed by the grim event in the D.A. Conservatory. Miss Marple's mind is sharp, piecing together the threads from Basil Blake's cottage and the whispers at the Majestic Hotel. Today, she's here to talk to the Bantrys again, sensing that their home holds more secrets than they've let on. She carries a small bouquet of chrysanthemums from her garden, a polite excuse for another visit. Dolly Bantry greets her at the door, her usual cheer dimmed by worry. "Jane, I'm so glad you're here," she says, ushering her into the drawing room. The colonel is there, puffing on his pipe, his face creased with irritation. "This whole affair is a blasted nuisance," he grumbles. "The police tramping through, reporters sniffing around, it's unbearable." Miss Marple nods sympathetically, settling into a chintz armchair. She knows. The Bantrys are rattled, and rattled people often let slip things they'd rather keep. Hidden over tea, Miss Marple gently probes about the night of Ruby's death. Dolly repeats that she locked the conservatory at 8 and heard nothing unusual after. but her hands tremble slightly as she pours the tea, and Miss Marple notices. "Dolly, dear," she says kindly, "you seem troubled. There. Is there something you haven't mentioned?" Dolly hesitates, glancing at her husband. The Colonel clears his throat. "Nothing to it, Jane. Just nerves. Dolly's been jumpy since that poor girl was found." Miss Marple sips her tea, watching them closely. She asks about the staff maids, gardeners, anyone who might have seen something. Dolly mentions their housekeeper, Mrs. Eccles, a stern woman who's been with them for years. "She's loyal, but she's been acting odd," Dolly admits. "Snapping at the maids, staying up late. I caught her in the conservatory yesterday, just staring at the spot where, you know." Miss Marple makes a mental note to speak with Mrs. Eccles. She asks to see the conservatory again, and Dolly leads her there. The glass walls gleam, but the air feels heavy with the memory of death. Miss Marple examines the floor, noticing the tiles have been scrubbed clean to clean, perhaps. She spots a faint scratch near the door to the garden, barely visible. "Curious," she murmurs, bending down. "It looks like something heavy was dragged across the threshold." Dolly, flustered, says, "Oh, that's probably from moving flower pots." But Miss Marple isn't convinced. While Dolly fetches more tea, Miss Marple wanders to the library, where the Colonel is sorting through papers. She casually mentions the ruby-encrusted necklace the police mentioned. The Colonel's pipe nearly falls from his mouth. "Never heard of it," he says quickly, but his eyes dart to a locked drawer in his desk. Miss Marple pretends not to notice, asking instead about visitors to the estate. "Anyone new come by recently? Perhaps someone Ruby knew?" The Colonel shrugs. "Just the usual delivery boys, the vicar. No one who'd know a dancer from Danamoth." Later, Miss Marple finds Mrs. Eccles in the kitchen, kneading dough with fierce energy. The housekeeper is a tall woman with gray hair pulled into a tight bun, her face unreadable. Miss Marple chats about village life, easing into questions about the night of the murder. Mrs. Eccles says she was in her room by 9, reading, but her answers are clipped, and she avoids eye contact. "Did you ever meet Ruby Keene?" Miss Marple asks. Mrs. Eccles pauses, her hands still. "Once, at the market." Flighty girl, always smiling at men. Not surprised she ended up in trouble. There's a bitterness in her tone that Miss Marple tucks away for later as she leaves the kitchen. Miss Marple overhears two maids whispering in the hall. "Mrs. Eccles was up late that night," one says. "I saw her light on past midnight, and she was carrying something heavy to the shed." The other maid shushes her, but Miss Marple's curiosity is piqued. She slips out to the garden shed, a small structure behind the conservatory. The door is unlocked, and inside, among tools and sacks of fertilizer, she finds a tarp covering something bulky. Lifting a corner, she sees a wooden box, locked tight. Could it hold the missing necklace? Something more incriminating? Back in the drawing room, Dolly seems more anxious, twisting her rings. Miss Marple gently asks if the Bantrys ever visited the Majestic Hotel. Dolly blushes. "Oh, once or twice for dinner. Arthur likes their roast duck." But she quickly changes the subject, talking about a new rose trellis. Miss Marple senses Dolly's hiding, something perhaps a connection to Ruby or the hotel. The Colonel, meanwhile, keeps glancing at the clock, as if eager for her to leave. As Miss Marple prepares to go, she notices a photograph on the mantel. Young man in army uniform, the Bantry's son, Jack, who's away in London. Something about his smile reminds her of Ruby's description. Charming, ambitious. Could he have known her? She doesn't ask yet, but the thought lingers. Outside, she spots the gardener, Mr. Prescott, raking leaves. She asks if he's seen anything odd in the shed. He scratches his head. Mrs. Eccles was out there a few nights ago, moving things. Looked like she didn't want to be seen. Walking home, Miss Marple's mind hums. The Bantrys are nervous, Mrs. Eccles is secretive, and that locked box in the shed is a puzzle piece that doesn't yet fit. Is Dolly protecting someone, perhaps? Her son? And what's the Colonel hiding in that desk drawer? The answers are close, hidden in the polite facade of Gossington Hall. Next time, we'll follow Miss Marple as she digs into the Bantry's past and uncovers a surprising link, too. Ruby Keene that shakes the case to its core. Chapter 5. Echoes of the Past. The early evening light casts long shadows across St. Mary Mead as Miss Marple sits in her cozy cottage, her knitting needles idle in her lap. The events at Gossington Hall have stirred her curiosity, and the photograph of Jack Bantry, the Colonel's son, lingers in her mind. There's something about his confident smile that feels like a thread worth tugging. Ruby Keane's death is no random act, and Miss Marple suspects the Bantry family's past holds a key to unraveling the mystery. Tonight, she's determined to learn more, starting with a visit to an old friend who knows the village's history better than anyone, Miss Hartnell, a spinster with a memory as sharp as her own. Miss Marple slips on her coat and steps into the cool evening air, her small flashlight bobbing as she walks the short distance to Miss Hartnell's cottage. The village is quiet, save for the distant bark of a dog and the rustle of leaves in the breeze. Miss Hartnell, a wiry woman with a penchant for local lore, welcomes her with a pot of strong tea and a plate of slightly stale biscuits. "Jane, you're out late," she says, her eyes gleaming with curiosity. "Is it about that dreadful business at the Bantrys?" Miss Marple smiles, knowing Miss Hartnell needs a little prompting to share what she knows. Over tea, Miss Marple steers the conversation to the Bantry family, particularly Jack, who's rarely mentioned in village gossip. Miss Hartnell leans forward, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Jack Bantry was always a wild one, even as a boy. Charming, mind you, but reckless. Got into scrapes at school fights, sneaking out, that sort of thing. The Colonel was furious when Jack left the army to chase some business venture in London." She pauses, sipping her tea. "He was back in St. Mary Mead a few months ago, you know. Stayed at Gossington Hall for a week. I saw him at the post. Office all smiles, but he looked troubled." Miss Marple's interest sharpens. "Troubled, you say? Did he mention anything about his plans?" Miss Hartnell shakes her head. "Not to me, but I heard he was mixed up with some fancy crowd. In Dannymoth, the kind that go to that majestic hotel." The connection to Ruby Keane's workplace isn't lost on Miss Marple. She asks if Jack ever mentioned a dancer or anyone named Ruby. Miss Hartnell frowns. "It's not by name. But he was seen with a young woman at the village fete last summer, a blonde, all dolled up. Could have been her." Leaving Miss Hartnell's, Miss Marple decides to follow this lead. The next morning, she takes the bus to Dannymoth again. This time to visit the local library, where old newspapers might hold clues about Jack's activities. The librarian, a cheerful woman named Miss Ellis, helps her dig through back issues of the Dannymoth Gazette. They find an article from last summer's fete, with a grainy photo of Jack Bantry laughing with a young woman in a sparkly dress. Caption doesn't name her, but the resemblance to Ruby Keane is striking. Same blonde hair, same vivacious smile. Miss Marple's heart quickens. Could Jack have known Ruby more closely than anyone realized? Back in the village, Miss Marple stops by the vicarage to speak with the vicar, Mr. Clement, who often hears confessions of sorts from his flock. Over a cup of weak coffee, she mentions Jack Bantry casually. Mr. Clement, a gentle man with a knack for remembering faces, recalls seeing Jack at the fete with a young woman. "They seemed close," he says thoughtfully. "She was laughing, but Jack looked distracted, like he was carrying a weight. I offered to talk, but he brushed it off." Miss Marple nods, her mind racing. Was Jack involved with Ruby romantically? Or was there another connection? Determined to learn more, Miss Marple returns to Gossington Hall that afternoon. Dolly is in the garden, pruning roses, her face pale. "Jane, you're back," she says, forcing a smile. Miss Marple wastes no time, mentioning Jack's visit. Last summer, Dolly's pruning shears, pause mid-snip. "Jack. Oh, he was just here briefly, catching up. He's so busy in London." Her voice is too bright, and Miss Marple notices a slight tremor in her hands. She presses gently. "Did he ever mention a girl from the Majestic? A dancer, perhaps?" Dolly's eyes widen, but she shakes her head. "Oh, no, Jack doesn't go in for that sort of thing." The Colonel is in his study, surrounded by hunting trophies and old maps. Miss Marple finds him polishing a pair of antique pistols, his movements brisk. She mentions the newspaper photo of Jack at the fete. The Colonel's face tightens. "That boy's always been a magnet for trouble," he mutters. "But he's got nothing to do with this mess." His tone is defensive, and Miss Marple notices he avoids her gaze, focusing instead on the pistols. She changes tack, asking about the locked drawer she'd seen before. "Just old papers," he says gruffly, but his fingers tighten on the polishing. Cloth before leaving, Miss Marple takes another look at the conservatory, now eerily quiet. She examines the garden door again, noting the scratch she'd seen before. This time, she spots something new, a tiny bead, red and shiny, caught in a crack in the tiles. It looks like it came from a dress, perhaps rubies. She pockets it, discreetly, knowing it could be evidence. Outside, she runs into Mr. Prescott, the gardener, who's raking near the shed. She asks if he's noticed Jack around the estate recently. He hesitates, then says, "Saw him last summer, late one night, walking toward the conservatory. Thought he was just taking a stroll." That evening, Miss Marple sits by her fireplace, her mind piecing together the puzzle. Jack Bantry's connection. To Ruby feels undeniable now, a photo, a sighting at the Fete, a late-night walk. But what was their relationship? A romance gone wrong? Or something more complicated? Dolly's nervousness and the Colonel's defensiveness suggest they know more than they're saying. Not that locked box in the shed could it hold a clue to Jack's involvement. Miss Marple thinks of the ruby necklace, still missing, and wonders if it's tied to the Bantry family secrets. She decides to write to her nephew, Raymond West, in London, asking him to check if Jack's been seen at any clubs or hotels. Where Ruby might have performed, Ramon's connections in the city could uncover something the police had missed. As she seals the letter, she hears a knock at her door. It's young Tommy, the paper boy, with a late edition of the Gazette. A small article catches her eye. A London jeweler reports a ruby necklace matching the description of Ruby's pond. Last month, by a man fitting Jack's description, her pulse quickens. The trail is leading somewhere dangerous. She knows she's getting closer to the truth. As the fire crackles, Miss Marple's thoughts turn to the next step. Jack Bantry is a piece of this puzzle, but how does he fit with Basil Blake, Conway Jefferson, or the mysterious figure on the Majestic's balcony? The answers are out there, tangled in the lives of those who knew Ruby best. Next time we'll follow Miss Marple as she tracks down Jack Bantry himself, uncovering a confrontation that reveals a shocking truth about Ruby's final hours. Chapter 6. Tracking down Jack Bantry, the morning air in St. Mary Mead carries crisp edge as Miss Marple prepares for her boldest move yet. The clues pointing to Jack Bantry, his presence at the Fete with a girl resembling Ruby Keene the late night, stroll near the conservatory, and the pawned ruby necklace have convinced her that the Colonel's son holds answers to the murder. Jack is in London, according to his parents, so Miss Marple decides to take the train to the city to find him. She packs a small overnight bag, tucks her knitting inside, and heads to the station, her mind sharp with purpose. The village may be quiet, but London's bustle is where secrets like Jack's come to light. The train journey is swift, and by noon Miss Marple steps into the noisy chaos of London's Paddington Station. The city hums with energy, taxis honking, street vendors calling, and young women in bright coats hurrying past. She makes her way to a modest hotel near Bloomsbury, where her nephew, Raymond West, has arranged a room. Raymond, a writer with a flair for the dramatic, meets her for lunch at a nearby cafe. Over scones and tea, she shares her suspicions about Jack. Raymond's eyes light up. A mystery, Aunt Jane? I knew you'd sniff out something juicy. I've heard Jack's been haunting the jazz clubs in Soho, places Ruby might have danced at. I'll take you there tonight. That evening, Miss Marple, looking slightly out of place in her tweed coat among the glittering crowd, follows Raymond into a smoky club called the Blue Note. The air is thick with the scent of gin and perfume, and a band plays a lively swing tune. Miss Marple's sharp eyes scan the room, spotting Jack Bantry at a corner table, his army-honed posture unmistakable. He's alone, nursing a whiskey, his face drawn and tired. Raymond whispers, "That's him, all right. Want me to introduce?" "You." But Miss Marple shakes her head. She prefers to observe first, unnoticed. She takes a seat at a small table nearby, pretending to fuss with her knitting. Jack doesn't notice her, his attention fixed on the stage where a young dancer twirls in a sequined dress. Miss Marple watches his expression, nostalgic, almost pained. Could he be thinking of Ruby? She overhears a waitress chatting with the bartender. Jack's been here every night this week, staring at the dancers. Ever since that girl from Danamouth died, he's been a wreck. The words confirm Miss Marple's hunch. Jack and Ruby were connected, deeply so. When the band takes a break, Miss Marple approaches Jack, her demeanor gentle but direct. "Mr. Bantry, I'm Jane Marple, a friend of your parents. May I have a word?" Jack startles, his eyes wary, but he nods and offers her a chair. "Didn't expect to see anyone from St. Mary Mead here," he says, forcing a smile. Miss Marple wastes no time. "I'm looking into Ruby Keene's death. I believe you knew her." Jack's face pales, and he takes a quick sip of his drink. "Ruby? Yeah, I met her. She danced at the Majestic. Nice girl." Miss Marple presses gently, mentioning the fate, the necklace, and his late-night walk near Gossington Hall. Jack's composure cracks. "Look, I didn't hurt her," he says, his voice low. "We were close for a while. Met her last summer at the hotel. She was different, full of dreams, wanted to get out of Danamouth. I thought I could help her." He admits they dated briefly, but it ended when he returned to London. "She wanted more than I could give," he says, his voice heavy. Connections, a big life. Miss Marple asks about the necklace. Jack hesitates, then confesses. "I gave it to her a gift back when things were good. It was my grandmother's, rubies and all. But Ruby pawned it a month ago. Said she needed cash for some plan." His voice turns bitter. "I was angry, sure, but I didn't kill her." Miss Marple notes his sincerity but also his clenched fists. She asks where he was the night Ruby died. Jack claims he was in London, at a business meeting with a man named George Bartlett, a property developer. "Check with him," Jack says. "I'll tell you," as Miss Marple leaves the club. She feels the weight of Jack's words. His story rings true, but there's something he's not saying. Was he jealous of Ruby's big plan? Or did he know who she was meeting that night? She decides to verify his alibi, asking Raymond to track down George Bartlett. Morning, Raymond calls with news. Bartlett confirms the meeting, but it ended early. Around 9 p.m., Jack could have caught a late train to Danamouth, reaching Gossington Hall by midnight. Back in her hotel room, Miss Marple spreads out her notes. Her knitting, untouched. She thinks about Jack's relationship with Ruby, romantic, but strained by her ambition. The pawn necklace suggests Ruby was desperate for money, perhaps to escape someone or something. Miss Marple recalls the red bead from the conservatory. Floor? Could it tie Jack to the scene? Or someone else using his connection to Ruby to throw suspicion his way? She visits a Soho pawn shop mentioned in the newspaper article, hoping to learn more about the necklace. The pawnbroker, a wiry man with thick glasses, remembers Ruby. Pretty girl, nervous as a cat, he says. Brought in a ruby necklace. Said it was hers. I gave her a fair price, but she kept looking over her shoulder like someone was following her. He adds that a man came in days later, asking about the necklace doll, dark-haired with a scar on his cheek. Not Jack, but someone new. Miss Marple's mind races. Could this be the man from the red convertible? Before returning to St. Mary Mead, Miss Marple stops at a small cafe to meet Raymond again. He's dug up more on Jack's London life. He's in debt, chasing risky investments, and was seen arguing with a man matching the pawnbroker's description at a club last month. Sounds like Jack's in deep, Raymond says. Miss Marple nods, her thoughts swirling. Jack's troubles, money, love, pride could have driven him to desperation, but she's not convinced he's the killer. Someone else was watching Ruby. Someone with a scar and a motive. As she boards the train home, the city fading behind her, Miss Marple feels the puzzle tightening. Jack's story adds new layers, love, betrayal, and a missing necklace, but the man with the scar is a shadow she can't ignore. Back in the village, she'll need to revisit the Majestic Hotel and confront the one person who might know this mystery man's identity. Stay tuned, because next time, we'll dive into a heated confrontation at the hotel that exposes a dangerous secret Ruby carried to her grave. Chapter 7. The confrontation at the Majestic. The sun rises over St. Mary Mead, painting the village in soft pinks and golds, but Miss Marple's mind is far from serene. The man with the scar, mentioned by the pawnbroker in London, is a new thread in the tangled web of Ruby Keane's murder. Armed with this clue, Miss Marple decides to return to the Majestic Hotel in Danamoth, where Ruby spent her final days. She senses that someone there, perhaps Josie Turner, Raymond Starr, or even Conway Jefferson, knows this mysterious figure. Today, she's ready to stir the pot and see what surfaces. With her trusty umbrella and a small notebook tucked into her handbag, her eyes bright with determination, the Majestic Hotel is as grand as ever, its white facade gleaming against the sea. The lobby hums with guests, but there's an undercurrent of unease. Ruby's death has left its mark. Miss Marple settles into a corner of the tea room, where the clink of china and the murmur of conversation provide perfect cover. She orders a pot of Earl Grey and observes the staff and guests, her knitting needles clicking softly to keep up appearances. Her goal is clear: find someone who can identify the man with the scar and uncover his connection to Ruby. She spots Josie Turner, the sharp-faced dancer arranging flowers at the reception desk. Miss Marple approaches, her tone warm and disarming. "Miss Turner, I'm Jane Marple, a friend of the Bantrys. I'm trying to understand poor Ruby's last days. Did she ever mention a man with a scar on his cheek?" Josie's hands freeze on a vase, her eyes narrowing. "A scar? No, she didn't talk about anyone like that. Ruby kept to herself, mostly." Her voice is tight, and Miss Marple notices a slight flush on her cheeks. Josie's lying, or at least holding something back. Undeterred, Miss Marple presses on, mentioning Ruby's pawn necklace. Josie's reaction is swift. She drops a rose, its petals scattering. "I don't know anything about that," she snaps, then softens. Ruby was always flashing jewelry, showing off. Maybe she got mixed up with the wrong sort. Miss Marple smiles gently, letting the silence linger. Josie fidgets, then blurts, "Look, I saw her with some man outside the hotel a week before she died. Tall, dark hair, maybe a scar eye. Didn't get a good look." They were arguing, and Ruby looked scared. Miss Marple nods, encouraging her to continue, but Josie clams up, saying she has work to do next. Miss Marple seeks out Raymond Starr, the lanky dancer who's practicing steps in the ballroom. The vast room is empty, save for him, his shoes tapping rhythmically on the polished floor. Mentioning herself, mentioning her interest in Ruby's friends. Raymond is more open than Josie, his face softening. "Ruby was ambitious, wanted to be a star," he says, pausing his dance. "She was meeting someone important," she said, "but she wouldn't tell me who." When Miss Marple describes the man with the scar, Raymond's expression shifts. "I saw a guy like that once, hanging around the service entrance. He was talking to Ruby, handing her something, a letter, maybe. She didn't look happy about it." Miss Marple's pulse quickens. The letter could be a vital clue. She asked if Raymond knows the man's name. He shakes his head. Never got it. But he wasn't a guest too rough-looking for the Majestic crowd. Before she can ask more, the hotel manager, Mr. Prestwick, interrupts, his gold watch chain glinting. "Miss Marple, may I ask what brings you back?" His tone is polite, but edged with suspicion. She deflects with a vague comment about enjoying the hotel's ambiance, but she senses he's watching her closely. Her final stop is Conway Jefferson. It's the wealthy widower who doted on Ruby. She finds him in the lounge, playing cards with his daughter-in-law. Adelaide Addy. Mark Gaskell, his son-in-law, is absent, likely at the bar. Miss Marple joins them, her demeanor unassuming. "Mr. Jefferson, I understand Ruby was dear to you. Did she ever mention a man with a scar, perhaps someone troubling her?" Jefferson's face clouds, his hands pausing on the cards. "A scar? No, she never said anything like that. But Ruby was secretive lately, always slipping away to take phone calls. Addie, usually quiet, speaks up. She was scared of someone, I think. I overheard her on the phone once saying, 'You can't make me.' The conversation is cut short when Mark Gaskell storms in, his face flushed from drinking. 'What's this about Ruby again?' he demands, glaring at Miss Marple. 'You're stirring up trouble, poking around.' Jefferson tries to calm him, but Mark's temper flares. 'Ruby was a gold digger, stringing along anyone with money. Maybe this scarred fellow got tired of her games.' His outburst draws. stares, and Miss Marple remains calm, noting his clenched fists and the way Addie shrinks back. Could Mark know the man with the scar be him? As evening falls, Miss Marple steps onto the hotel terrace, the sea breeze cool against her face. She's about to leave when she overhears two waiters near the garden, their voices low. "That scarred guy was back last week," one says. "Saw him arguing with Ruby by the pier. Looked like he was threatening her." The other nods. "Heard he's got to record some crook from London." Miss Marple's heart races. A criminal connection could explain Ruby's fear in the letter Raymond mentioned. Before heading back to St. Mary Mead, Miss Marple visits the hotel's telephone operator. A young woman named Lily. With a kind smile and a small tip, she asks if Ruby received any unusual calls. Lily hesitates, then admits there was one. Man calling her a lot gruff voice, always asking for his girl. Ruby got upset every time. Once, I heard her say, "Leave me alone, Eddie." I didn't see him, but she mentioned he had a scar. The name Eddie is a breakthrough, and Miss Marple thanks Lily, her mind buzzing. On the bus home, Miss Marple pieces together the day's findings. Josie's evasiveness, Raymond's sighting, Addie's overheard phone call, and Lily's mention of Eddie all point to a dangerous man who frightened Ruby. Was he her killer, or a piece of a larger puzzle? The letter, the necklace, and the red bead from the conservatory swirl in her thoughts. She suspects Eddie is the key, and he may link back to someone close to Ruby, perhaps even Mark Gaskell, whose temper hides more than he admits. As the bus rolls into the village, stars bright overhead, Miss Marple knows she's closing in. The man with the scar is no phantom, he's real, and his shadow looms over the case. Next time we'll follow her as she hunts for Eddie, uncovering a criminal underworld that Ruby stumbled into, and a revelation that brings her one step closer to the killer. Chapter 8. Into the Shadows of the Underworld. Morning mist blankets St. Mary Mead as Miss Marple sits at her breakfast table, a cup of tea steaming beside her untouched knitting. The name Eddie, whispered by the telephone operator at the Majestic Hotel, echoes in her mind. A man with a scar, a gruff voice, and a hold over Ruby Keene. This Eddie could be the key to her murder. Miss Marple's instincts tell her he's no ordinary thug. Ruby's fear and the pawn necklace suggest ties to a darker world. Today, she's determined to track him down, but she knows this hunt will take her beyond the village's safe borders. With a resolute nod, she pens a note to her nephew, Raymond West, asking for his help in London's shadier corners, and sets out to gather local leads first. Her first stop is the village police station, where Inspector Slack is buried in paperwork. His mustache twitches as Miss Marple enters, her prim hat and serene smile disarming his usual gruffness. "Miss Marple, what now?" he sighs, but she catches a glint of curiosity in his eyes. She mentions Eddie, describing the scarred man linked to Ruby. Slack's brow furrows. "Sounds like Eddie Corcoran, a small-time crook from London." Done. Time for theft. Maybe blackmail. We'll check our files. But he's slippery moves between Dannymouth and the city. Miss Marple asks if Eddie was ever seen near Gossington Hall. Slack shakes his head but promises to dig deeper, clearly intrigued despite himself. Next, Miss Marple visits the village pub, the Blue Boar, a place where tongues loosen over pints. The landlord, Mr. Hogg, is polishing glasses behind the bar, his round face friendly but cautious. She orders a lemonade and chats about village comings and goings, easing into questions about strangers. "Heard of a man named Eddie, perhaps with a scar?" she asks lightly. Hogg pauses, then leans in. "I saw a fellow like that a month back, drinking alone. Rough type, kept to himself. Asked about the road to Gossington Hall, though." Miss Marple's pulse quickens. Eddie was scouting the Bantry's estate. She thanks Hogg and leaves, her mind racing. Back home, she finds a reply from Raymond waiting. He's tracked down a lead. Eddie Corcoran frequents a dingy club in London's East End called the Black Cat, a hub for gamblers and petty criminals. Raymond offers to meet her there tomorrow, warning her it's no place for a lady. Miss Marple smiles to herself. Dangerous places often hold the truth. She catches the afternoon train to London, her small suitcase packed with essentials and her notebook filled with clues. The red bead, the necklace, the letter Raymond Starr mentioned. Each piece points to Eddie. In London, Raymond meets her at King's Cross, his usual flair subdued by concern. "Aunt Jane, are you sure about this?" he asks, as they take a taxi to the East End. The Black Cat is a grimy building with flickering neon signs and a bouncer who eyes them suspiciously. Inside, the air is thick with smoke and the clink of glasses. Miss Marple, looking like a misplaced grandmother, draws curious glances, but she settles at a corner table, her eyes scanning the crowd. Raymond points out a man at the bar, tall, dark-haired, with a jagged scar across his left cheek. It's Eddie Corcoran. Miss Marple watches as Eddie talks to a wiry man in a cheap suit, their heads close together. She catches fragments of their conversation. Payment due, no more chances. Eddie's voice is low, menacing. She nudges Raymond to distract the wiry man, and he obliges, striking up a chat about the races. Miss Marple approaches Eddie, her demeanor meek. "Mr. Corcoran, I'm Jane Marple, looking into Ruby Keene's death. I believe you knew her." Eddie's eyes narrow, his scar twitching. "Never heard of her," he growls, but his hand tightens. On his glass, she presses gently, mentioning the phone calls Ruby received and the letter seen at the Majestic. Eddie's face hardens. "You're meddling in things you don't understand, old lady." Ruby was trouble-owed money, big money. She thought she could play games. He leans closer, his voice a hiss. "Back off, or you'll regret it." Miss Marple remains calm, noting his fear beneath the bravado. She asks about the necklace. Eddie laughs harshly. "That bauble. She sold it to pay debts. Didn't help her, though." Before she can ask more, he storms out, shoving past patrons. Raymond rejoins her, wide-eyed. "That was bold, Aunt Jane." She nods, her mind cataloging Eddie's words. He knew Ruby knew about the necklace and was likely blackmailing her. But was he her killer? His threat suggests he's dangerous, but also scared perhaps of someone. Higher up, Miss Marple decides to follow another lead. The wiry man Eddie was talking to. Raymond, ever resourceful, learns his name, Tommy Pierce, a bookies runner with ties to Danemouth's underworld. They track Tommy to a nearby alley where he's counting cash under a street lamp. Miss Marple approaches, her voice soft but firm. "Mr. Pierce, I'm inquiring about Ruby Keene. What did Eddie Corcoran want with her?" Tommy startles, nearly dropping his money. "I don't know nothing," he snaps, but his eyes dart nervously. With Raymond looming nearby, Tommy relents. "All right, Eddie was squeezing Ruby for cash. She owed his boss some big shot in Danemouth. Ruby said she'd pay, but then she turned up dead." Miss Marple asks about the boss. Tommy clams up, muttering about trouble before slipping away into the dark. On the train back to St. Mary Mead, Miss Marple pieces together the day's revelations. Eddie Corcoran was pressuring Ruby, likely on behalf of a powerful figure. The debts, the letter, the necklace all point to a criminal network Ruby got entangled in. But how does this connect to Gossington Hall, Jack Bantry, or the man on the Majestic's balcony? She suspects Eddie's boss might be the missing link. Someone with enough influence to reach both the hotel and the Bantry's estate. As the village comes into view, as Marple feels the net tightening. Eddie's threats won't deter her. She's faced worse in her quiet way. The underworld's shadows are spreading, but she's ready to shine a light. Next time, we'll follow her as she uncovers the identity of Eddie's boss, revealing a connection that ties the village to a dangerous conspiracy. Chapter 9. The puppet master revealed. The soft glow of dawn filters through Miss Marple's cottage curtains as she sits at her writing desk, a fresh pot of tea steaming beside her. The encounter with Eddie Corcoran in London has left her certain that Ruby Keene's murder is tied to a larger scheme, orchestrated by someone powerful. Eddie's mysterious boss. The web of clues: debts, a pawned necklace, a letter. A red bead points to a figure with influence in both Danemouth and St. Mary Mead. Today, Miss Marple is determined to uncover this puppet master, and she suspects the trail leads back to the Majestic Hotel, where secrets fester among the glittering facade. With her notebook in hand and a steely resolve, she sets out for Danemouth once more. The bus to the Majestic is crowded with market-goers. But Miss Marple's mind is elsewhere, piecing together the players, Jack Bantry's romance, Eddie's threats, and the man on the balcony. She arrives at the hotel mid-morning, the sea sparkling under a clear sky. The lobby is quieter today, with guests lounging on terraces, unaware of the storm brewing beneath the surface. Miss Marple heads straight for the manager's office, hoping Mr. Prestwick's pompous exterior hides useful information. She finds him adjusting his gold watch chain, his face a mask of forced cheer. "Miss Marple, back again?" he says, his smile tight. "What brings you here?" With her usual disarming charm, she mentions hearing of a businessman with influence over the hotel's staff, someone Ruby might have known. Prestwick bristles, insisting the Majestic runs a tight ship. But Miss Marple notices his fingers. Fidget with a pen, a telltale sign of unease. She presses gently, mentioning Eddie Corcoran. Prestwick's eyes flicker. "I don't know any Eddie," he says quickly, but adds, "Ruby did attract unsavory types she was too friendly with." Guests. Miss Marple smiles serenely, noting his haste to deflect. She thanks him and moves on, certain he's hiding something in the hotel's garden. She spots Adelaide Addie, Conway Jefferson's daughter-in-law, sitting alone on a bench, her face pale. Miss Marple joins her, offering a kind word about the roses. Addie's hands twist her scarf, her eyes distant. "You're looking into Ruby's death, aren't you?" she says softly. Miss Marple nods, mentioning a powerful figure who might have pressured Ruby. Addie hesitates, then whispers there was a man, someone important. Ruby mentioned him once, said he owned people. I thought she was exaggerating, but she was terrified. When Miss Marple describes Eddie's scar, Addie shakes her head. Not him. Someone bigger. Someone who stays in the shadows. Miss Marple's next stop is the hotel's service entrance, where staff gossip freely. She lingers near a group of porters unloading crates, pretending to admire the view. One porter, a young man named Sam, mentions a big shot who visits the hotel discreetly, always through the back, drives a black car. Fancy one, Sam says. Saw him with Ruby once, giving her an envelope. She looked like she'd seen a ghost. Miss Marple asks for a name, but Sam shrugs. Nobody says it out loud. He's got money. There runs things around here. The description matches no one she's met, but the black car is a new clue. Determined to dig deeper, Miss Marple visits the Danamuth police station, where a friendly sergeant owes her a favor from a past case. She asks about local figures with criminal ties, mentioning Eddie's boss. The sergeant, after a quick check of records, lowers his voice. Sounds like Victor Lang, a businessman with a clean front-tones, clubs, hotels, you name it. It is. He's got his hands in blackmail, loan sharking, the lot. Never been caught, though. Lives in a big house outside Danamuth. Miss Marple's heart skips. Victor Lang, could he be the man pulling the strings? Back at the Majestic, she decides to confront Mark Gaskell, Conway Jefferson's son-in-law, whose temper and cryptic comments about Ruby have lingered in her mind. She finds him in the bar, sipping a gin and tonic, his pencil mustache twitching. With irritation, Miss Marple, you're persistent, he says, half amused, half annoyed. She sits, her tone mild but probing. Mr. Gaskell, I've heard of a man named Victor Lang. Did Ruby ever mention him? Mark's glass pauses midair, his eyes narrowing. Lang? Dangerous name to throw around. Ruby got in over her head with people like that. She thought she could outsmart them. Miss Marple pushes further, mentioning the envelope in the black car. Mark's face darkens. You're digging too deep, old lady. Lang's not someone you cross. Ruby owed him money, big money. I told her to steer clear, but she wouldn't listen. His voice cracks, revealing a mix of anger and guilt. Marple senses he knows more but is scared. She asks if Lang was at the hotel the night Ruby died. Mark hesitates, then mutters, he was around. Saw his car out back, that's all I'm saying. He downs his drink and leaves abruptly, leaving Miss Marple with a chilling certainty. Victor Lang is the key. As evening falls, she takes a walk along the Danamuth Pier, the sea air sharp and salty. She recalls the waiter's story of Ruby arguing with a man here, likely Eddie, acting on Lang's orders. Shadow looms over everything. Ruby's debts, the letter, perhaps even the murder. But why kill her in the Bantry's conservatory? Miss Marple suspects a message was being sent, or a frame job to deflect suspicion. She thinks of the locked box in the Bantry's shed. Could it hold evidence tied to Lang? Before returning to St. Mary Mead, she stops at a local newsstand, picking up a Dannymoth paper. A small article catches her eye. Victor Lang is hosting a charity gala at the Majestic tomorrow night. It's a bold move for a man in the shadows, and Miss Marple sees her chance. She'll attend the gala, blend in with the crowd, and watch Lang closely. If he's the puppet master, he might reveal himself, or someone close to him will. As the bus winds back to the village, Miss Marple's mind hums with possibilities. Victor Lang's influence explains Ruby's fear, Eddie's threats, and the hotel's uneasy silence. But how does he connect to Jack Bantry or the conservatory? The red bead and the necklace nag at hers, small clues that could unravel the whole scheme. The gala will be her chance to confront the heart of this conspiracy. Stay tuned, because next time we'll follow Miss Marple into the Lion's Den at the Majestic's gala, where a shocking encounter brings her face to face with the killer's motive. Chapter 10. The gala and the truth unveiled the evening sky over. Dannymoth glows with the last hues of sunset as Miss Marple arrives at the Majestic Hotel for Victor Lang's charity gala. The hotel is ablaze with lights, its ballroom packed with elegantly dressed guests sipping champagne under chandeliers. Miss Marple, in a modest black dress and her best pearl brooch, blends into the crowd, her sharp eyes scanning for Victor Lang, the man she believes orchestrated Ruby Keene's murder. Her notebook tucked in her handbag holds every clue to red bead. The pawn necklace, the letter, Eddie Corcoran's threats, and Jack Bantry's secrets. Tonight, she's determined to unravel the final threads and expose the killer. The ballroom is a swirl of music and chatter, but Miss Marple feels the tension beneath the glamour. She spots Conway Jefferson in his wheelchair near the dance floor, his face weary but alert. Adelaide Addy stands beside him, her eyes darting nervously. While Mark Gaskell hovers at the bar, his glass never empty, Josie Turner and Raymond Starr are performing a lively dance routine, but Josie's smile is forced. Miss Marple's gaze settles on a tall man in a tailored suit, his presence commanding Victor Lang. His dark hair is slicked back, and he moves with the confidence of someone untouchable. Shaking hands with local dignitaries, Miss Marple positions herself near a buffet table, pretending to nibble on canapes while listening to snippets of conversation. She overhears a guest mention Lang's side business, hinting at shady dealings. Her suspicions solidify. Lang's wealth comes from more than hotels and clubs. She recalls the porter's story of a black car in an envelope and marks. Fear when she mentioned Lang? Ruby was caught in his web. Likely blackmailed over debts, but why was she killed in the Bantry's conservatory? She approaches Conway Jefferson, engaging him in polite small talk about the gala's cause orphans, ironically. Mr. Jefferson, she says softly, did Ruby ever mention Victor Lang? His hands tighten on his wheelchair. She hinted at a powerful man pressuring her, but no names. I thought she was being dramatic. Addie, overhearing, whispers, she was terrified, Mr. Jefferson. I should have helped her. Miss Marple notes Addie's guilt and presses gently, asking about a letter Ruby received. Addie hesitates, then admits, I saw her burn one in her room, crying. It had a red seal fancy, like from someone important. The red seal sparks a memory, the red bead in the conservatory. Could it be from the same source? Miss Marple excuses herself and slips toward the hotel's staff corridor, hoping to find Lily, the telephone operator. Lily is there, sorting mail, and confirms the letters seal-matched one she'd seen on Lang's correspondence. Ruby got it the day she died, Lily says. She was shaking when she read it. Miss Marple's mind races. Lang lured Ruby somewhere, perhaps, to her death. As the gala reaches its peak, Ms. Marple spots Eddie Corcoran lurking near the ballroom's balcony, the same balcony where Ruby was watched. She approaches, her voice calm but firm. "Mr. Corcoran, I know you worked for Victor Lang. What did he want with Ruby?" Eddie's scar twitches, his eyes darting to Lang across the room. "You're in over your head, lady," he hisses. Ruby crossed Lang. She tried blackmailing him, thought she could use his secrets to get free. He don't play like that. Before she can ask more, Eddie vanishes into the crowd. Miss Marple's heart pounds, Ruby desperate to escape Lang's grip turned the tables, threatening to expose his crimes. But who killed her? She recalls the locked box in the Bantry's shed and the Colonel's nervous glance at his desk drawer. She needs to confirm one last piece. Slipping out to the hotel's phone booth, she calls Raymond West, asking him to check Lang's connections to Gossington Hall. Raymond calls back quickly. Lang's been buying land near St. Mary Mead, dealing with the Colonel for months. Shady stuff, permits, payoffs. The pieces snap together. Miss Marple returns to the ballroom, her eyes locking on Mark Gaskell, who's arguing with Lang in a corner. She approaches, her presence unnoticed, and overhears Mark hiss, "You said it'd be clean? Now I'm stuck covering your mess." Lang's voice is cold. "You wanted the money, Gaskell? Don't complain now." Miss Marple's mind whirls. Mark is tied to Lang, and Ruby's death was no accident. She decides to act. Gathering Inspector Slack, who's attending the gala in plainclothes, she shares her theory. Victor Lang ordered Ruby's murder too. Silence her blackmail. Gaskell carried it out, using his access to Gossington Hall to stage the body. She explains the clues. The red bead from Lang's sealed letter, dropped in the struggle. The necklace pawned to fund Ruby's escape. The letter she burned to hide her plans. In Mark's temper, fueled by greed and fear of Lang, the Conservatory was chosen to frame the Bantrys. Deflecting suspicion from Lang's operation, Slack, skeptical but swayed, confronts Mark and Lang. Mark cracks under pressure, his face crumpling. "It wasn't supposed to happen like that," he cries. "Lang told me to scare her, but she fought back. I strangled her, then took her to the hall. The Colonel's key was easy to swipe. Lang tries to slip away, but Slack's men block him. The Colonel, summoned from St. Mary Mead, admits to Shady Land, deals with Lang, but swears he knew nothing of the murder. The locked box, he confesses, holds documents proving Lang's bribes Ruby had stolen one, sparking her fatal mistake. As Lang and Mark are arrested, Miss Marple stands quietly, her work done. Ruby's ambition led her to challenge a dangerous man, and Mark's weakness sealed her fate. The Conservatory, a place of beauty, became a stage for betrayal. Back in St. Mary Mead, Miss Marple sips tea by her fire, her knitting resumed. The village is peaceful again, but she knows human nature's shadows never fully fade. Thanks for joining this mystery hit. Like, subscribe, and comment below with your thoughts on Ruby's tragic tale.